Okay, the Welsh Rugby Union are facing a potential player strike this weekend for the England game. It's to do with player contracts and the funding model for the game. Now, we've discussed this back in 2019 as well, but what was agreed in 2019, which meant all the four current regions continued as they were. There was no mergers, there was no new team in North Wales to replace, what was the Celtic Crusaders that failed in the early 2000s. They basically had a short to medium term measure sticking plaster. COVID has obviously really hit Welsh rugby finances really badly, but Welsh rugby's finances have been struggling since 1995. In fact, professional rugby's finances globally, for the most part, there are some leagues that are profitable, like France and Japan. Major League Rugby starting to really solidify itself in North America, but for the most part, club rugby is losing money. Professional rugby union is losing money badly. Only a handful of leagues, because they've got that corporate sponsorship, or they have the wealthy owners who don't mind dipping into the pockets, or they have really good attendances, like Japan and France, are making money. And back in 2019, the Welsh Union was in this same position, similar position. Augustine Peashot, when he was running for the World Rugby presidency against Bill Beaumont, basically said rugby needs to wake up. We need to have the top end talent just take a slight pay cut so we can evenly distribute more money to the lower paid, and we can have a restructuring of the financial systems. He lost that election. He's no longer part of World Rugby. He got frustrated with the direction that the international game and the governing body was taking. COVID then hit. Now, COVID, obviously, no fans in attendance, games getting cancelled, leagues shutting down. When league play resumed, obviously no fans allowed or reduced attendances. And when you're a gate-driven sport, basically, apart from the internationals, when you are a gate-driven sport at the club level, fans going to games, that's a massive hit, because the TV money is not as much as football in Europe. Football in Europe dominates. Technically, ice hockey is the second most popular sport in Europe, continent-wide, so it's not the most popular sport in Europe. It's in some countries, it's not even the third most popular sport where it's professional. So the TV deal isn't as great. The sponsorship deals aren't as great. The attendances at games are lower than, let's say, football, for example. The media coverage, all these various contributing factors mean the product is harder to sell. What's happening with Wales is, with this current situation, I'm not going to go back to 2019 and then back to the early 2000s, because they're all linked, but the current situation, back in January last year, the PRB, yes, them, the Welsh Union, the players' reps, and the four regions got round the table to start figuring out a framework in the short to medium term for player contracts, funding models, centralised contracts, the whole lot going forward. By December, an agreement in principle was agreed. A roadmap was agreed for this round of negotiations, in the sense of player contracts, how much they go up by or go down by, and how long that basically collective bargaining agreement would last, and the funding model, where if you're on a centralised contract, how much a percentage would the union cover of the player's contract over the region, for example. And that was agreed in December, but not ratified. They didn't sign off on it. And this is the problem. 70 players are off contract at the end of the season who have no certainty. And because of the English game having similar problems with club finances, with two teams basically going bust this season, mid-season, and having to be forced out of the Premiership, it's not as if Welsh players can go, well, Worcester or Wasps can sign me. There's two less clubs that could potentially sign Welsh talent if they go, right, I'll retire from international duty for a couple of years and hire more money in England or France or over in Major League Rugby in America, or go to Japan or go to the Southern Hemisphere. So basically play overseas, because they can get paid more. However, only a handful of leagues are actually making money, which is basically France and Japan. Super Rugby, the Australian Rugby Union's got money problems. New Zealand's got money problems. South Africa's got money problems. So this is not just a uniquely Welsh issue. But 70 players are on centralised or subsidised contracts from the Welsh Union, who cannot renegotiate with their four regions new contracts. And because of what's happening in the English game, which would be the logical, let's go to England, just hop across, go across the border, across the River Severn, and the financial concerns in the English game, with the salary cap going to be dropping from next season, it poses a lot of problems. And then you've got to throw in the Welsh selection rules as well. So the Welsh players and their representatives have said, we're giving you until Wednesday to get back round the negotiating table to get this sorted, meet with us. Now, over the last week or so, social media has become quite toxic. A lot of ex-players have come out and criticised the Welsh Union. Hibbard, Phillips, Coombs, these guys played with Grand Slam winning teams. These guys played at World Cups. These guys have gone on Lions tours, and they're saying, yeah, this is a shambles. Now, they've all retired from the game now. When you've got a current player, I know Alan Wynne-Jones, people are saying he shouldn't be selected, his form's not good enough. But when you've got a player of the standing, ex-captain as well, and Alan Wynne-Jones going, this is not good enough, we don't have any certainty past the summer in a World Cup year if we've got clubs to go back and play for, regions to go back and play for. That's not good. When you've got an unnamed player who's basically said, the pay's crap anyway, he didn't want to be named, can't get a mortgage, can't get a deposit, family to feed, all these other reasons. And yes, loads of industries have got money problems right now and wage freezes and low pay rises. But professional sport, especially a contact sport, your career, you could be done by the age of 23, 25. Now, two players who've had serious injuries. One of the Evans brothers, got Max and Tom. I forget which one it was. I think it was Tom, basically broke his neck. I could be wrong. It could be Max. But playing for Scotland against Wales, Lee Byrne goes in for the tackle. Net gets caught in an awkward position. They're both going for the ball, actually, if I remember, and he doesn't move. Serious neck injury. I think he broke his neck or he ruptured a vertebra in his neck, displaced it. Told, you can't play ever again. Done. He's only 10, 12 caps into his Scotland career, something like that. Handful of caps. Young, promising, really talented outside back. Told, you can't play anymore. Then I'll go to a more veteran player, but still late 20s, early 30s. Dennis Delan of Italy against England at Twickenham. Shattered his leg, double break, never played again. Now, they both gone on to have careers in other industries and make a lot of money. They were lucky. However, the rehabilitation, and to be told, you're not allowed to play again, that's too serious, you can't play again. And it wasn't as if they were near the end of their careers. They were still reasonably young at the time. They were both in the Six Nations. Both players never played again. They were shocking injuries as well. Rare, thankfully, but shocking. Never played again. And I use them as examples because let's say a Welsh player gets injured playing against England, playing against Italy, playing against France in this year's Six Nations in the remaining games, but then doesn't have the contract certainty of okay, well, you've got the contract, you may not be able to play at the moment because of rehabilitation, but you've got your contract, so you've got money coming in. You can get injured and then you go, oh, by the way, your contract's ended. So you've got to pay for medical bills if on top of your NHS care, if you can't afford to go private. So medications, physiotherapy, loss of earnings, because you can't work. If you've got a bad neck injury or you've shattered your leg, it's not as if you can go to work necessarily. There's that concern. There's also the concern that the Welsh regions, again, their funding model. How much of a percentage of the players' wages, if they're on centralised or partially centralised contracts, subsidised, do they pick up? The fact that the agreement is there on in waiting, basically, it's been agreed upon, hasn't been signed off, is bizarre. But then the Welsh Union is facing a whole barrage of criticism of how it's handled a whole range of issues, not just the player contracts and the funding model with the regions, but also that undercover BBC investigation that uncovered rampant racism, homophobia, sexism and bullying. And then when people complained or raised concerns about how people were being treated, employee welfare basically, they were not taken seriously. The fact that Nigel Owens was homophobically abused on the minutes in meetings is just disgusting. And that came out. That the women's welfare officer wasn't taken seriously, even though she knew her stuff and was researching thoroughly with the right academics to go, this is how we need to support the women's game, was laughed out of meetings. The Welsh Union's under a lot of pressure anyway for a whole range of things. And then Warren Gatland, asked in a press conference about his thoughts about the potential of a Welsh strike, and he said, "I understand the players' frustrations, but I don't support a strike." That's basically what he said. So possibly, they've got to pay Wayne Pivac out for relieving him of his duties. The whole thing's a mess. Whole thing's a mess, and in a World Cup year. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if the Welsh Union meets with the players' representatives and if they can avert a strike. But it's repeating of 2019, where again we were in a similar situation with uncertainty surrounding the regions and the player contracts, and with the players basically have regions to go back to. Would they be able to sign a new contract? Would they be able to stay playing for the Welsh national side, but if they were playing outside Wales? The same vicious cycle 4 years later has continued. The issue is, in this current situation, they've been discussing this since January last year, and they still haven't ratified the agreement in principle. So that's why the players are frustrated. Ex-players have been very critical of how it's been handled, but they're saying, well, we've been here before. How many times? We've had these discussions behind closed doors with the PRB and the Welsh Union and the 4 regions multiple times with this issue. And professional rugby has been struggling financially since professionalism. Professionalism, when it was brought in 1995, hasn't really worked. Because the game, apart from in France and Japan, for example, and possibly the US with Major League Rugby, isn't profitable. It's not making money. Clubs are losing money. Look what's happened to Wasps and Worcester. Clubs and club owners are losing money hand over fist. A handful of clubs in England in the Premiership are actually making money. So the problems keep repeating themselves. We'll see what happens. We'll see if a resolution can be found and a strike averted. But I don't think this problem's going to go away. If they do come to an agreement, it's going to be a sticking plaster at best, short to medium term, and then 2, 3, 4 years later, we'll be back here again, I have no doubt. Because we keep repeating this vicious cycle with Welsh rugby, or just the rugby in general. But Welsh rugby, it seems to be an ongoing issue, and has been since the late 90s. Whatever solution they come up with, it's temporary, it doesn't work. They've tried setting up a Welsh region, the Celtic Crusaders. That failed. That was an expensive failure. They've tried rebranding the 4 existing, regions by dropping the place names. So instead of Cardiff Blues, it's just the Blues. Instead of the Netherley Scarlets, it's just the Scarlets. That is not going to bring fans in if you don't have that local connection to your provincial team. The issues with the semi-professional Welsh Premiership. There's issues there. There's then the amount of players who are on drugs bans. I watched that documentary as well a few years ago. Is shocking when it comes to failed drugs tests for performance enhancing and recreational drugs. Welsh rugby players are your number 1 group of athletes in the UK who are on the banned list. Then you have the issues with centralised contracts and the fact that players can't play overseas if they want to play for Wales, which is then putting added financial pressure on the union and the regions, which can't afford it. But then the opportunities to play overseas are now limited because very few leagues actually make money where they can afford to pay them. Because the English salary cap is going to drop. So I don't know what solution they come up with, but they need to try and they desperately need to restructure. They desperately need to there's no negotiation in good faith, I don't believe. But there we go. Let's see if a strike can be averted. Place your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.